Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Radical Candor podcast. I'm Kim Scott.
I'm Jason Rosoff.
I'm Amy Sandler, and today we're going to be tackling a critical issue that, Kim, you write about in Radical Respect. The question is, what happens when organizations silence employees instead of removing the obstacles that hinder their success? What's bringing this up to mind is Meta's recent arbitration case against former employee Sarah Wynne Williams, whose new book, Careless People, exposes misconduct within the company and has prompted us to really explore the broader implications of non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, and forced arbitration in the workplace. So let's get into it.
Yes, this is such an important issue, I think. And non-disclosure agreements are supposed to prevent people from sharing technical secrets, trade secrets. They were not supposed to be used as a way to hide wrongdoing. And yet that is how they're being used, as are non-disparagement agreements, which is a whole other thing. And so I think that this book is really important. And I think it's not just about this book or Meta. We have a systemic problem in the workplace, in workplace culture, that leads leaders to try to dodge the checks and balances that our society has put in place to prevent leaders from harming individual employees or even all of us. And in the case of this book, I feel like the author was harmed, but we're all being harmed. So I'm excited. I read the book, the whole book. I know you all didn't necessarily read the whole book yet, but I'm excited to chat with you all about it.
Great. I will put the book up. Yeah, I have not yet read it. I have purchased it. And Kim, do you want to just mention for folks why you felt so strongly about encouraging people to take a look at the book?
Yeah, not just take a look, but buy the book.
Yeah.
Because as an author, I'm very sympathetic for what's happening to this author, because when you publish a book, your publisher will tell you the author sells the book. And so by silencing the author of this book from speaking about her book, she's making it really difficult for her to sell the book. I mean, of course, the strategy seems to have backfired, and now everybody's buying the book.
It's the Streisand effect.
Yes, the Streisand effect in action, which is good. But let's get it to the top. Let's get it to number one on the New York Times bestseller list. So
and this
for
is
as many weeks running,
because of a legal arbitration case that's forcing her to not be able to. Wanted to make sure for folks who weren't aware where we were in this moment.
Yes, you're probably better at explaining details.
I don't know. I'm going to throw that one to Jason. He's our legal analyst, even though I don't know if he has a JD, but I feel like he's played the role of someone who has. I just got into law school. That's as far as I go.
I did so badly on the LSAT, I gave up.
I think you've basically covered it. Essentially, as employment or as part of the separation agreement, at some point she signed something that basically said that she wasn't allowed to disclose some set of things about her experience as an employee. And in addition to that, there was a clause that said that disputes must be decided by arbitration as opposed to being able to go to court. And what I read about it basically said that an arbitrator, and arbitration is binding, just like going to court. This is one thing that people may not understand, is that it's another legal process, but the judgment of the arbitrator was that there would be irreparable harm caused by allowing Wynne Williams to actually promote the book. And so she was enjoined from doing that. She was forbidden from doing it.
And the thing about arbitration is that it really tends to favor employers over employees, but because the companies wind up paying these arbitration, they're not totally neutral, I think.
That is
they try to be.
The case, yeah.
They try to be neutral, but they're not. In my experience.
It's one of those things that in theory, like arbitration in theory is better for employees because you don't absolutely need an attorney in order to represent you. Like, it could be less costly. It could take a lot less time in order to reach a resolution. But Kim, to your point, in many cases, the deck is stacked against, similar to we've recreated the legal system in arbitration by stacking the deck against the person with less money.
And we've dodged the checks and balances that the government should be putting on the power of any one company or any one wealthy individual with the legal system. So anyway, it's a big problem. Now, I want to talk about irreparable harm because it seems to me reading this book that there's an awful lot of evidence that Facebook has done irreparable harm to a bunch of us. So we can't read the whole book, but I'd love to just share a couple of passages from a chapter towards the end of the book called Emotional Targeting. And we can talk about those, and then we can talk about NDAs and forced arbitration and non-disparagement agreements and why it's a problem, why these things are problems. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, I'm going to jump in. In April 2017, a confidential document is leaked that reveals Facebook is offering advertisers the opportunity to target 13 to 17-year-olds across its platforms, including Instagram, during moments of psychological vulnerability when they feel, quote unquote, worthless, insecure, stressed, defeated, anxious, stupid, useless, and like a failure. Or to target them when they're worried about their bodies and thinking of losing weight. Basically, when a teen is in a fragile emotional state. As a parent, I have to say this fills me with rage that they would offer this or that advertisers would agree to do it. What do you all think?
Yeah, I am not a parent, but I am someone who's been a teenager. I think we've all been teenagers. And
Yes.
I can just speak to my own, sort of journey around like food and body and psychology. And certainly I was obsessed with television and, consuming mass media, but it was not targeted individually to me based on my state. And so it feels like we're already dealing in a consumer society, but then to have it targeted at your most vulnerable is infuriating and enraging. So that's my emotional, like personal reaction to it. And then on behalf of our most vulnerable, like at the most vulnerable moment,
Yes.
I find it enraging.
Yes, totally.
Jason, can you bring us down?
From our rage?
I don't think so. I think that it's the right. I think rage is the right reaction to something like this. One of the most difficult parts of being alive today for people who are connected in some way, shape, or form to the internet is dealing with a bombardment of information that is like constantly coming at us. Like we just aren't made for it. We haven't developed the skills to deal with it. And then to throw into that mix, like not only is it just completely overwhelming and hard to parse, but we're using the information that we can gather about someone to inject into that stream of difficult to parse information, essentially like poison. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's bad. So it was already bad.
Yeah.
And then it was like, now we're going to make it worse. Like
It's
we're
more
going to
precisely bad.
exactly.
Yeah, the
like we've taken
amplification
advantage
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is commonly referred to like as dark patterns, right? That there are
Yes.
these dark patterns in how people design software that hook into our brains at a very sort of, close to the metal, like close to the hardware.
Yeah.
And take advantage of the various vulnerabilities that human beings have to when you feel sad, upset, worthless, or whatever, we're more susceptible to messaging about that same thing.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not only teenagers who have these feelings. Like I have all,
Yeah.
we all do. I mean, we want to protect our children, but we should also protect all of us. And so one of the things about this book that read very credible, because I can imagine, like having worked at a big tech company, like you can't believe this is happening. And then you look into it and at first they think maybe this is just a one-off bad actor. And then as they look into it, they find this is systemic. So I'll read another passage. At first, we think the leaked document is one Facebook made to pitch a gum manufacturer targeting teens during vulnerable emotional states. Then eventually the team realizes, no, the one that got leaked was from a bank. So now they're finding a bunch of these. There are obviously many decks like this. So like this is systemic. This is not just kind of a one-off thing. Facebook does work for a beauty product company tracking when 13 to 17-year-old girls delete selfies. So it can serve a beauty ad to them at that moment. We don't know what happens to young teen girls when they're targeted with beauty advertisements after deleting a selfie. Nothing good. There's a reason why you erase something from existence, why a teen girl feels that it can't be shared. And surely Facebook shouldn't be using that moment to bombard them with extreme weight loss ads or beauty industry ads or whatever else they push on teens feeling vulnerable. The weird thing is that the rest of our Facebook coworkers seem unbothered by this reactions.
I think like a moment of empathy for other Facebook workers. Like I suspect, as is the case when there are a lot of like questionable / bad things happening around you, it becomes difficult to like tune your reaction to these
Yeah.
events appropriately.
And I bet a lot of them were horrified.
Correct.
Actually.
And then there's also this question of like, what's it okay to express, right? Like, do you feel like it's safe to express your horror at this particular thing? Or you feel like if you say you're horrified, that you're taking some other kind of risk with your job or career or whatever else?
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, I think it's sort of, yeah, it's just hard, I think, to be in a situation where you feel like you have uncovered something that is so obviously horrifying or obviously awful, and then to have the reaction, like a sort of non-plus sort of reaction from the people around you
Yeah.
of like, well, it's
Yeah.
just, that's
Yeah.
Tuesday for you.
Yeah. So here's another moment of empathy for Facebook, then Facebook, now Meta employees. What does Facebook do about this? A junior researcher in Australia is fired for making that deck, even though lots of people are obviously making these decks. I'm reading, even though that poor researcher was most likely just doing what her bosses wanted. She's just another nameless young woman who was treated as cannon fodder by the company. And that rings so true to me. Like, we're going to find one person who did this, even though we know this is a systemic thing, and blame that one person.
Yeah. What was coming up, Kim, as you were asking that question and reading about it was even just like the Milgram experiment of just like when people are following rules and feeling like, my boss told me to do this, so it must be okay because this is my boss, right? Or this is the rule. And then to what Jason was saying, do I feel safe speaking up against it? So even, people might have had moral concerns, but was there the safety and all of those questions about being a whistleblower? So I'm just thinking as people are listening to this, the places that we might be in, whether we're the junior researcher feeling like, do I have the power to speak up? And the person who's forcing the junior researcher to do that,
Yeah, or not forcing them, but like this is this kind of stuff gets normalized, and when you're young and early in your career, and this is what everyone around you is doing, like maybe you haven't asked the questions, and it's not, you've been put in a difficult situation, and it is the job of your leadership to lead, not to blame you for something that is a systemic problem that they have created, But it turns out that firing that one junior assistant doesn't solve all the problems. Facebook has to come out with more sort of PR to do damage control, and so they offer another statement that this author says is a flat out lie. Facebook does not offer tools to target people based on their emotional state, even though obviously they do. And then after that statement comes out, the author goes on to say one of the top ad executives for Australia calls me late one night to complain. Why are we putting out statements like this? He wants to know. This is the business, Sarah. We're proud of this. We shout this from the rooftops. This is what puts money in all our pockets. And these statements make it look like it's something nefarious. So now all of a sudden somebody is getting mad. Somebody else at Facebook is getting mad at her for distancing the company from what he's selling. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I think there's a thing here where I see, it's a form of rationalization that I feel like happens a lot in tech in particular, which is we there's a tendency to look at the potential of something to like be very good and
Yeah.
to weigh that much more heavily than the actual harm that the thing is doing right now.
Yes.
Like that is a thing that gets repeated over and over and over again. It's sort of the history of all technological advancements is we like oversell the good. And I think part of what we're saying like is that why does it have to be one or the other? It's a false dichotomy. Like, why can't we address the harm that the thing is doing and realize the upside potential? It doesn't have to be one or the other. And when you create an environment that makes it seem like it's one or the other, then you wind up with a harm perpetuating machine
Yes.
because there's no brakes on the thing. You know what I'm saying? There's
Yes.
nothing to actually slow it down and
Yeah.
stop it from doing the harm and that's why we wind up with a book like this, which is many years later, a set of well-documented allegations of like all of this wrongdoing over and over
Yes.
and over again, this repeated pattern of wrongdoing. And I feel like what you say in Radical Respect, Kim, which is like the reason why this seems so expensive to deal with and why, I mean, who knows what Meta's reasons are for trying to enforce this particular non-disclosure agreement are, what their precise reasons are. But like the problem is the system is set up wrong. It was impossible to talk about these things and to deal with them and to say, hey, wait a second, actually, this is really harmful. Like,
Hmm.
why don't we have a conversation? Like that wasn't possible.
Yeah. There
And so
there was a culture of institutional betrayal, not institutional courage.
And also, Kim, what's
exactly.
coming up is, when we've had some conversations about this when we were in business school and everything that mattered, the only thing that mattered was the shareholder and maximizing, wealth for the shareholder. So it goes back to your measurement problem because the passage that you are reading from to continue, this person, this top ad executive says, he's out there every day promoting the precision of these tools that hoover up so much data and insight on and off Facebook so it can deliver the right ad at the right time to the right user. And this is what headquarters is saying to the public, quote, how do I explain this? He asks. And 13 to 17-year-olds, quote, that's a very important audience. Advertisers really want to reach them. And we have them. We're pretending we don't do this. And so
Yes.
for me, when I read that, that's basically about you're optimizing just for those metrics, but you're not measuring harm, which I think is
Yes.
what Jason is like. There's no metric of harm caused. And that's why the incentives, I think, are so misaligned.
Yeah, totally agree with that. It's such an important I did write this novel called The
I think it's
Measurement
time
Problem.
to dust it off.
The
Bring it
Measurement
back.
Problem, which is
Yeah.
all about capitalism is really good at rewarding what it can measure and very bad at rewarding what it values, like our teenagers, our children. Like how do we bake that into the metrics? Also, Jason, going back to what you're saying about optimism. So careless people is a quote from the Great Gatsby, and it just so happens my son just read The Great Gatsby and is writing a paper about it. And I was reading his paper yesterday, and I'm like, oh my God. And the paper he's writing is about how we have this sort of rosy view of the past as Americans. And that then sort of pushes us to have this glorious view of the future and to ignore the present reality that we're in. And I'm like, that is what is happening here. That is exactly what is happening here is a refusal to admit Daisy loves Tom and married him. Therefore, I cannot be married to her. Now I'm referring back to Great Gatsby.
Great Gatsby, yeah. I think there's just like so many problems. It feels like to me so many problems in human in a group of humans is the unwillingness to talk precisely about what is really happening.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
to put real, clear, unambiguous words to like what is actually happening. So many problems are rooted in either an unwillingness or a fear of doing exactly that. And I think this is a great example of it was literally not okay to say the word. You know what I'm saying? Like there was the complaint that was being raised by the executive that we were just quoting from the book was basically like no, you're saying this is bad and I'm saying it's not even okay to say that this is bad. This is so good that you can't disparage it. You cannot say that there's something wrong with this because this is what puts all the money in our pockets. It's literally like it, I don't know, like that's sort of like the
I mean, I'm sure that the executive who said that to her was in a hard place. He's like, I'm out here selling this, and you're out there telling the press I'm not selling this. Like, what are my customers going to say?
yeah, yeah. And I guess what I'm saying is like the temptation to um to basically like squash disagreement, like any sort of disagreement. And I know we're talking about the public statement versus what was privately actually happening, but like that effort to squash disagreement in order to preserve harmony, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
what
only
that
good news. The
yeah, only
conference
good news
room.
for me, only good news for the customers. Like we only want to talk about the good that this thing can do. It is like the source of a lot of a lot of maybe not unintentional evil in the world, right?
Yeah,
Because you're not thinking about the consequences of the actions. You're making it
yeah,
impossible.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit. Let's take a step back away from the book and talk about like hopefully these kinds of things are not happening at your company.
Well, and Kim, before we do, because I do want to get there, I just want to ask something that's on my mind. So I imagine it might be on some other folks' mind
Yes.
before we sort of shift off from Facebook
Yeah.
/ Meta, which is that, obviously when you first wrote Radical Candor, one of the stories, you've worked closely with Sheryl Sandberg. So I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of reflect on that relationship and how that might inform, what you're sharing now.
Yes, Bob Sutton asked me this on LinkedIn over the weekend. Bob Sutton, author of the No Asshole Rule. And my response is there's part of me that's tempted to remain silent about how important I think this book is out of loyalty to Sheryl, but I don't think that's actually loyal to Sheryl. I mean, I will say for the record, Sheryl was a great boss. She hired me at a time when I was desperate, actually, in my career. And I'll be forever grateful to her for the things I learned from her and for the role that she played in my career. So there's that. But I don't think it does her any good. I don't think it's an act of loyalty to that Meta, where she no longer works, is doing this to this author and trying to cover up the harm that they're doing not only to the author but to each and every one of us. And so it's in that spirit that I want to talk about this book. There's all kinds of sort of I don't know how to even characterize them. There's all kinds of negative comments about her in the book, but I think that that's not a reason not to read the book.
I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. And, if you're open to it, just because I can imagine we're going to get into some stories where you felt like you didn't step up and you might have done things a little differently, but also extending yourself some compassion for choices you made. Do you think part of what motivates you to speak up is because of moments when you maybe have been more reluctant to share your voice? Or I just want to acknowledge that you said it might have been easier not to say something now.
I mean, there have been a bunch of times in my career, and I write about many of them in Radical Respect, where I didn't speak up. And in retrospect, I wish I had spoken up. And very often the reason I didn't speak up was that there might be a cost to me of not speaking up. Of speaking up. And I think it's important to decide and to try to decide before you're in the heat of the moment when you're going to, where your line is, when you're going to speak up, even if it does cost you something. Because, the cost to me of not speaking up, like in one instance that I'm thinking of, was probably a few $1 million, and in retrospect, I should have said something and risked getting fired and not getting, but the temptation not to say, like, it gets bigger. Like, how many of us would walk away from billions of dollars? It's harder. I want to acknowledge that there's some very human difficulty, and I don't know what I would do if something bad was happening and my silence was going to buy me $1 billion. I like to think I would walk away and say the thing. I believe I would, but can I say I'm sure? No. I don't think any of us are sure what we would do in that moment. I also want to say that our economic system rewards people for the measurement problem is a big problem.
Yep. Well, it's a great, and heartfelt reflection. I think for all of us, I love that guidance of like really thinking for yourself in this moment, like, where are my lines so that I can kind of hold myself accountable. I think it might be interesting too, just to have almost a buddy in that process to kind of help you hold yourself accountable. And I know you had your own story, Kim, around NDAs, around non-disclosure agreements. So did you want to
Sure.
bring
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
up?
Yeah. So I believe NDAs are wrong. I'm enormously grateful to Ifeoma Uzoma and others who worked on the Silence No More Act, which we'll talk more about in a second. But I will also acknowledge that I one time asked an employee to sign an NDA. And this was like one of those moments in my career that I think about all the time. So I had started a company and I was the co-founder and CEO. This is not Radical Candor. This was many years ago. And I sort of believed in this moment, and we've talked about this before. I believed in this moment, like all this other BS that happened at all these other terrible companies where I worked will not happen when I'm in charge because I have good intentions, you know? And of course, it did happen. And there was an employee who felt that she was experiencing a hostile work environment and she was going to sue the company for the experiences that she had had at the company. You know, and I did not think any company where I was in charge would create a hostile work environment for you know, most especially for a woman. That was gender was the thing that I was most focused on having experienced myself. And rather than stopping and saying, you know, I should really look at what's going wrong here at this company that I've started, I dismissed her claims out of hand, paid her some amount of money, and made her sign an NDA, which was the advice that my lawyer, who was also a woman, by the way, gave. And so I want to say, like, power corrupts. Power had corrupted me. Power had corrupted the attorney. Like, we were all doing the wrong thing. And it's easy when you're in a position of power and you can silence other people. It's tempting to do it, especially if they're saying something about you and your company that you would rather not be true. And so that was me, you know, not sort of being courageous, not creating an organization that exemplified institutional courage, but instead succumbing to institutional betrayal. And I'm afraid I'm not the only leader who has done that.
No,
I'm certain. I'm absolutely certain that you're not. I think going back to what you said at the very top of the podcast, which is like that these things are being used for, you know, well, I'm sure that there's a long history of using NDAs for not disclosing things other than technological secrets that I'm ignorant of. But I will say, like, the idea hide harm behind an NDA, like essentially that someone can trade their rights to like address a wrong that was done to them for, you know, in some cases for nothing, like literally, like they just bully people into signing these agreements.
Yeah,
and
you can't quit until I had one person come to me and it was actually a man. His employer was saying, you can't quit until you sign this NDA. I'm like, that is a pile of merd.
I think like any time we're leaning on the law to take away someone's right to, you know, ameliorate harm, like even if it's legal, as you say, Kim, that doesn't mean it's right. It's just sometimes the law is an ass.
Yes.
Just because it's possible.
That may be our title. The law is an ass.
Just because it's possible doesn't make it right. And I think, to your point, it's often in reaction. So the reason why it's easy to imagine yourself in the situation that you described finding yourself in, and that many other leaders have found themselves in over time, is because you didn't plan for the possibility that under your, you know, guidance, an organization could create a hostile work environment for somebody. Like, you didn't plan for that possibility. And because you didn't plan for it, then you were forced to react to what was happening as opposed to thoughtfully respond to the situation. And in those moments, it can be very easy to sort of like try to defend, you know what I'm saying, to try to carve out some defensible space as opposed to like doing the right thing writ large.
I mean, was unable, I was unwilling to believe it. I was unwilling to notice it because I was so convinced that I'm a good person. Like there's there are a few, there's all kinds of dangerous words, but I am a good person, like as opposed to I'm trying to be good and sometimes I do bad things. Like we need to, we really need to question ourselves anytime we say I'm a good person. Like, yes, I hope you are, but that doesn't mean you're doing good things. You know, as my son's baseball coach said, you can't do right if you don't know what you're doing wrong. And if you're so convinced that you are so good that you could never do anything wrong, you're going to do some really bad things.
One of the things, Kim, is you're bringing that up and what Jason was saying just around kind of checks and balances. For folks who are listening, like if you were to have could have a reset, and obviously time has changed, laws have changed. So, maybe first of all, just paint a picture of where are we in the legal landscape. You mentioned the Silence No More Act in 2022, but what are some things that leaders should be aware of like where the landscape is and how can they kind of intentionally create more checks and balances so that they can be more intentional?
Yeah, I think that if I could go back in time, one of the things I would have done is made it very clear that if you have a problem with the way that Kim has responded to something, it is expected that you'll go to Kim's co-founder and talk to him about it. And if both Kim and her co-founder are not doing the right thing, it is expected and okay for you to go and talk to the board about what is going wrong. And I think in a ideal world, like the board holds the CEO of the company accountable, but somebody needs to be holding the board accountable. And figuring that out, I think, is also really important for leaders to do. And one creative idea that some companies have done is they'll have a representative of the employees, rank and file employees on the board. Who is holding the chair of the board accountable for representing the interest of individual employees at the company. So I really think that one of the design principles of our country is checks and balances. And I think that's important not only in a political system, but also in a corporate environment.
Great. And then just for folks who maybe aren't as aware, you had talked about the Silence No More Act in 2022. There's obviously a bunch of books that have come out on this topic. We've had Susan Fowler-Rigetti, the Uber whistleblower and author of Whistleblower, on this podcast, but whether it's books like She Said by Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey, if I hopefully got that right, Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, just really bringing up how NDAs can actually enable repeat offenders. So just from your own both research and also I know you've talked to so many folks as you put together Radical Respect and have been putting it out in the world. What do you want to share about the kind of current legal landscape?
Well, I think there's increasingly an acknowledgement that NDAs are used to cover up crimes, and that's not acceptable. There are the Silence No More Act was passed in California, but there's a national version of that is being considered. I mean, who knows what's happening in this environment with that? But I think increasingly people understand. There's a common sense, like this sort of you can't talk about what happened at this company is a way of silencing people about things that they should speak up about.
Yeah, I think there's a series of like it sort of almost feels like interlocking human challenges that make it really, really important to like grease the wheels of communication when it comes to wrongdoing. Because one, it's hard enough just to criticize somebody for doing bad work. Like,
yeah,
that's hard. We talk to leaders all the time where it's like, how do I tell this person that they didn't, that the presentation was
there's
awful?
Typos in there,
like
spinach in your teeth is one thing.
Yeah. So that's already hard. And then it's like in many situations, you're like criticizing your boss, like that we're describing here, you're criticizing your boss or the company for creating an environment that like created the harm that was done to you. So that's like extra difficult, like to figure out how you would do that. And since I think most people actually want to make a more efficient system. Right now, the perception is it's much more efficient to sort of like silence everybody than it is to actually to solve the problem. But I feel like the case of careless people is a good example of why that's just not true. It is not
Yeah.
more efficient. It would have been far more efficient to have a system where it was easy to actually have these conversations and
Yes.
address them.
Yeah.
And so like the idea is like, it's actually a win-win. You're not doing this for employees, although it is a benefit to employees to remove any obstacles that might exist to them being able to report bad behavior. And it's not just because you're trying to be a good person. It's because
Yeah.
like, if you can actually do it, it's a far more efficient system than the one that we have now, which is only reacting after the harm has already been done and productivity has already been lost, and that person, you know what I'm saying? Like, all of the damage is done, and now you're silencing the person. We're treating that like that's as though that's somehow more efficient than simply making it
Fixing
easier
the
to have.
problem. It's
Yeah,
like, imagine if instead of having a system where you identified and fixed bugs, you like buried them. Like, your product wouldn't work very well, and your company won't work very well if you do that for the way the company works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a really good example, since a lot of people can sort of imagine, like, everybody's experienced frustration with like a product not working the way that they want it to or that they expect it to. And we just don't talk about companies in the same way, which I think is a failure of imagination, to say like,
Yeah.
this is a designed object. Like, this
Yeah.
company and the culture that we're operating in is designed, and we're constantly communicating about how it should work. And either we're meeting the user, in this case the employees and customers' expectations, or we're not meeting their expectations. And wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't everybody be happier if we could more consistently actually meet the needs and expectations of not just our customers or our shareholders, but also our employees?
Yeah. I mean, the cover up is always worse for the crime, or, exacerbates the crime in any case. And if cover up is allowed to go on endlessly, it's, in the end, it's a disaster. I mean, institutional betrayal is bad for those who get betrayed, but it's ultimately betrays the institution itself. This is from Jennifer Fried, who's one of my favorite people, and a great and clear thinker about these things.
And Jennifer Fry is the author of Institutional Courage. Is that correct?
There's an organization called Institutional Courage.
Okay.
She wrote a book. She's written several books, which we'll put in the speaker's note.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes. So now it is time for our checklist, and these are tips to put radical candor, radical respect, and creating more just workplaces into practice right away.
All right. Tip number 1, end the use of NDAs for covering up wrongdoing. NDAs should protect business secrets, not shield bad actors from accountability.
Tip number 2, eliminate forced arbitration. Allow employees access to fair legal processes instead of private company-paid arbitrators. You can read lots more about how to eliminate NDAs and forced arbitration in Chapter 7 of Radical Respect. Get it wherever books are sold.
And tip number 3, build a culture of transparency and accountability. Ensure there are multiple safe ways for employees to report misconduct and take action when issues arise. Build management systems that put checks and balances on the power of leaders, and ensure that they can be held accountable for their behavior and their results. And once again, you can learn how to do this in Chapter 7 of Radical Respect.
And tip number 4, if you want to not only buy copies of this book, but send them to your senator, your representatives, your state and federal leaders, Best Bookstore will make that happen for you. We'll drop a link into the show notes.
All right. So that is copies of Careless People,
yes,
by Sarah Wynne Williams, and it's Best as in BEST.
Yes, Best Bookstore.
Best Bookstore.
It is the best books, one of the best bookstores. I love all independent
Truth in
bookstores.
marketing.
Yes. All right. Well, if you want to see the show notes, go to radicalcandor.com/podcast. Praise in public and criticize in private. So if you like what you hear, please do rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And of course, if you've got feedback for us, including especially criticism, email us podcast@radicalcandor.com. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.